Howdy, listening to squirrels. Part 2 of Chapter 22 of The Murder at the Vicarage. I never dropped anything in your study. That's not mine, that's Anne's. I know that, I said. Well, why ask me then? Anne must have dropped it. Mrs. Prothero has been in my study only once since the murder, and then she was wearing black, and so would not have been likely to have had on blue earrings. In that case, said Lettuce, I suppose she must have dropped it before. She added, that's only logical. It's very logical, I said. I suppose you don't happen to remember when your stepmother was wearing these earrings last? Oh, she looked at me with a puzzled, trustful gaze. Is it very important? It might be, I said. I'll try and think. She sat there knitting her brows. I've never seen Lettuce Prothero look more charming than she did at that moment. Oh, yes, she said suddenly. She had them on Thursday. I remember now. Thursday? I said slowly. No, Thursday, I said slowly, was the day of the murder. Mrs. Prothero came to the study in the garden that day, but if you remember, in her evidence, she only came as far as the study window, not inside the room. Where did you find this? Rolled underneath the desk. Then it looks, doesn't it? Said Lettuce coolly, although she hadn't spoken the truth. You mean that she came right in and stood by my desk? Well, it looks like it, doesn't it? Her eyes met mine serenely. If you want to know, she said calmly, I've never thought she was speaking the truth. And I know you are not, Lettuce. What do you mean? She was startled. I mean, I said, that the last time I saw this earring was on Friday morning when I came up here with Colonel Melchett. It was lying with its fellow on your mother's dressing table. I actually handled them both. Oh, she wavered, then suddenly flung herself sideways over the arm of her chair and burst into tears. Her short, fair hair hung down almost touching the floor. It was a strange attitude, beautiful and unrestrained. I let her sob for some moments in silence, and then I said very gently, Lettuce, why did you do it? What? She sprang up, flinging her hair wildly back. She looked wild, almost terrified. What do you mean? What made you do it? Was it jealousy? Dislike of Anne? Oh, yes. She pushed the hair back from her face and seemed suddenly to regain complete self-possession. Yes, you could call it jealousy. I've always disliked Anne, ever since she came queening it here. I put the damn thing under the desk. I hoped it would get her into trouble. It would have done if you hadn't been such a nosy Parker, fingering things on dressing tables. Anyway, it isn't a clergyman's business to go about helping the police. It was a spiteful, childish outburst. I took no notice of it. Indeed, at the moment she seemed a very pathetic child indeed. Her childish attempt at vengeance against Anne seemed hardly to be taken seriously. I told her so, and added that I should return the earring to her and say nothing of the circumstances in which I had found it. She seemed rather touched by that. That's nice of you, she said. She paused a minute and then said, keeping her face averted and evidently choosing her words with care, You know, Mr. Clement, I should get Dennis away from here soon. If I were you, I think it would be better. Dennis? I raised my eyebrows in slight surprise, but with a trace of amusement too. I think it would be better, she added, still in the same awkward manner. I'm sorry about Dennis. I didn't think Anyway, I'm sorry. We left it at that. That's it for 22. Doggone, I was almost finished. 5 more minutes. Good gravy. But when you get sleepy like I do and the lines start going together, let's go on to 23. I don't know how long it is, but we'll do what we can. On the way back, I proposed to Griselda that we should make a detour and go round by the barrow. I was anxious to see if the police were at work, and if so, what they had found. Griselda, however, had things to do at home, so I was left to make the expedition on my own. I found Constable Hurst in charge of operations. "No sign so far, sir," he reported, "and yet it stands to reason that this is the only place for a cache." His use of the word cache puzzled me for a moment as he pronounced it catch, but his real meaning occurred to me almost at once. "What I mean to say, sir, is, where else could the young woman be going, starting into the wood by the path? It leads to Old Hall, and it leads here, and that's about all." "I suppose," I said, "that Inspector Slack would disdain such a simple course as asking the young lady straight out." "Anxious not to put the wind up her," said Hurst. "Anything she writes to Stone or he writes to her may throw light on things. Once she knows we're on to her, she'd shut up like that." Like what exactly was left in doubt, but I personally doubted Miss Gladys Cram ever being shut up in the way described. It was impossible to imagine her as other than overflowing with conversation. "When a man's an imposter, you want to know why he's an imposter," said Constable Hurst didactically. "Naturally," I said. "The answer is to be found in this here barrow, or else why was he forever messing about with it?" "A raisin," I don't know, this is French, I guess, deter, that's not right, "for prowling about," I suggested, but this bit of French was too much for the constable. He revenged himself for not understanding it by saying coldly, "That's the amateur's point of view. Anyway, you haven't found the suitcase," I said. "We shall do, sir, not a doubt of it." "I'm not so sure," I said. "I've been thinking Miss Marple said it was quite a short time before the girl reappeared empty-handed. In that case, she wouldn't have had time to get up here and back. You can't take any notice of what old ladies say when they've seen something curious and are waiting all eager-like. Why, time simply flies for them. And anyway, no lady knows anything about time. I often wonder why the whole world is so prone to generalization. Generalizations are seldom, if ever, true, and are usually utterly inaccurate. I have a poor sense of time myself, hence the keeping of my clock fast. And Miss Marple, I should say, has a very acute one. Her clocks keep time to the minute, and she herself is rigidly punctual on every occasion. However, I had no intention of arguing with Constable Hurst on the point. I wished him good afternoon and good luck and went on my way. It was just as I was nearing home that the idea came to me. There was nothing to lead up to it. It just flashed into my brain as a possible solution. You will remember that on my first search of the path the day after the murder, I had found the bushes disturbed in a certain place. They proved, or so I thought at the time, to have been disturbed by Lawrence, bent on the same errand as myself. But I remembered that afterwards he and I together had come up upon another faintly marked trail, which proved to be that of the inspector. On thinking it over, I distinctly remember that the first trail, in parentheses Lawrence's, had been much more noticeable than the second, as though more than one person had been passing that way, and I reflected that that was probably what had drawn Lawrence's attention to it in the first instance. Supposing that it had originally been made by either Dr. Stone or else Miss Cram. I remembered, or else I imagined remembering, that there had been several withered leaves on broken twigs. If so, the trail could not have been made the afternoon of our search. I was just approaching the spot in question. I recognized it easily enough and once more forced my way through the bushes. This time I noticed fresh twigs broken. Someone had passed this way since Lawrence and myself. I soon came to the place where I had encountered Lawrence. The faint trail, however, persisted farther, and I continued to follow it. Suddenly it widened out into a little clearing, which showed signs of recent upheaval. I say a clearing because the denseness of the undergrowth was thinned out there, but the branches of the trees met overhead, and the whole place was not more than a few feet across. On the other side, the undergrowth grew densely again, and it seemed quite clear that no one had forced a way through it recently. Nevertheless, it seemed to have been disturbed in one place. I went across and kneeled down, thrusting the bushes aside with both hands. A glint of shiny brown surface rewarded me. Full of excitement, I thrust my arm in, and with a good deal of difficulty, I extracted a small brown suitcase. I uttered an ejaculation of triumph. I had been successful. Coldly snubbed by Constable Hurst, I had yet proved right in my reasoning. Here, without doubt, was the suitcase carried by Miss Cram. I tried the hasp, but it was locked. As I rose to my feet, I noticed a small brownish crystal lying on the ground. Almost automatically, I picked it up and slapped it into my pocket. Then, grasping my find by the handle, I retraced my steps to the path. As I climbed over the stile into the lane, an agitated voice near at hand called out, "Oh, Mr. Clement, you found it. How clever of you." Mentally registering the fact and the art of seeing without being seen, Miss Marple had no rival. I balanced my find on my palings between us. "That's the one," said Miss Marple. "I'd know it anywhere." This, I thought, was a slight exaggeration. There are thousands of cheap, shiny suitcases, all exactly alike. No one could recognize one particular one seen from such a distance away by moonlight, but I realized that the whole business of the suitcase was Miss Marple's particular triumph, and as much she was entitled to a little pardonable exaggeration. "It's locked, I suppose, Mr. Clement?" "Yes, I'm just going to take it down to the police station." You don't think it would be better to telephone?" Of course, unquestionably, it would be better to telephone. To stride through the village, suitcase in hand, would be to court a probably undesirable publicity. So I unlatched Miss Marple's garden gate and entered my house by the French window. And from the sanctity of the drawing room with the door shut, I telephoned my news. The result was that Inspector Slack announced he would be up himself in a couple of jiffies. When he arrived, he was in his most cantankerous mood. "So we've got it, have we?" he said. "You know, sir, you shouldn't keep things to yourself. If you'd any reason to believe you knew where the article in question was hidden, you ought to have reported it to the proper authorities. Wet my whistle. Water, 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 water. And apples. Gotta get more apples. And I was told last night on Dana's pineapple. It's a good fiber to eat. And I love pineapple. It was a pure accident, I said. The idea just happened to occur to me. And that's a likely tale. Nearly 3/4 of a mile of woodland and you go right to the proper spot and lay your hand upon it. Oops. Always forgetting to turn off my ringer. It was a timer. It's like Terry Gray. I would have given Inspector Slack the steps and reasoning which led me to this particular spot, but he had achieved his usual result of putting my back up. I said nothing. Well, said Inspector Slack, eyeing the suitcase with dislike and would-be indifference, I suppose we might as well have a look at what's inside. He had brought an assortment of keys and wire with him. The lock was a cheap affair. In a couple of seconds, the case was open. I don't know what we had expected to find, something sternly sensational, I imagine. But the first thing that met our eyes was a greasy plaid scarf. The inspector lifted it out. Next came a faded dark blue overcoat, very much the worse for wear. A checked cap followed. A shoddy lot, said the inspector. A pair of boots, very down at heel and battered, came next. At the bottom of the suitcase was a parcel done up in newspaper. Fancy shirt, I suppose, said the inspector as he tore it open. A moment later he had caught his breath in surprise, for inside the parcel were some demure little silver objects in a round platter of the same metal. Miss Maple gave a shrill exclamation of recognition. "The trencher salts!" she exclaimed. "Colonel Prothero's trencher salts, and the Charles II Taza. Did you ever hear of such a thing?" The inspector had got very red. "So that was the game," he muttered. "Robbery? But I can't make it out. There's been no mention of these things being missing." "Perhaps they haven't discovered the loss," I suggested. "I presume these valuable things would not have been kept out in common use. Colonel Prothero probably kept them locked away in a safe." "I must investigate this," said the inspector. "I'll go right up to Old Hall now." So that's why our Dr. Stone made himself scarce. What with the murder and one thing and another, he was afraid we'd get wind of his activities. As likely as not, his belongings might have been searched. He got the girl to hide them in the wood with a suitable change of clothing. He meant to come back by a roundabout route and go off with them one night while she stayed here to disarm suspicion. Well, there's one thing to the good. This lets him out over the murder. He had nothing to do with that. Quite a different game. He repacked the suitcase and took his departure, refusing Miss Marple's offer of a glass of sherry. She can't get rid of that homemade sherry. "Well, that's one mystery cleared up," I said with a sigh. "What Slack says is quite true. There are no grounds for suspecting him of the murder. Everything is accounted for quite satisfactorily. It really would seem so, said Miss Marple, although one never can be quite certain, can one? There's a complete lack of motive, I pointed out. He had got what he came for and was clearing out. Yes. She was clearly not quite satisfied, and I looked at her in some curiosity. She hastened to answer my inquiring gaze with a kind of apologetic eagerness. I've no doubt I'm quite wrong. I'm so stupid about these things, but I just wondered. I mean, this silver's very valuable, is it not? A Tazza, Tazza, sold the other day for over £1,000, I believe. I mean, it's not the value of the metal. No, it's what one might call a connoisseur's value. That's what I mean. The sale of such things would take a little time to arrange, or even if it was arranged, it couldn't be carried through without secrecy. I mean, if the robbery were reported and a hue and cry were raised, well, the things couldn't be marketed at all. I don't quite see what you mean, I said. I know I'm putting it badly. She became more flustered and apologetic, but it seems to me that the things couldn't just have been abstracted, so to speak. The only satisfactory thing to do would be to replace these things with copies. Then perhaps the robbery wouldn't be discovered for some time. That's a very ingenious idea, I said. It would be the only way to do it, wouldn't it? And if so, of course, as you say, once the substition, that's what it said, had been accomplished, there wouldn't have been any reason for murdering Colonel Prothero. Quite the reverse. Exactly, I said. That's what I said. Yes, but I just wondered. I don't know, of course, and Colonel Prothero always talked a lot about doing things before he actually did do them. And of course, sometimes never did do them at all. But he did say, yes, that he was going to have all his things valued, a man down from London for probate. No, that's when you're dead, for insurance. Someone told him that was the thing to do. He talked about it a great deal and the importance of having it done. Of course, I don't know if he had made any actual arrangements, but if he had, I see, I said slowly. Of course, the moment the expert saw the silver, he'd know, and then Colonel Prothero would remember having shown the things to Dr. Stone. I wonder if it was done then. This word is divided. Legerdemain, don't they call it? So clever, and then, well, the fat would be in the fire, to use an old-fashioned expression. I see your idea, I said. I think we ought to find out for certain. I went once more to the telephone. In a few minutes I was through to Old Hall and speaking to Anne Prothero. No, it's nothing very important. Has the inspector arrived yet? Oh, well, he's on his way. Mrs. Prothero, he's on his way. Mrs. Prothero, can you tell me if the contents of Old Hall were ever valued? What's that you say? Her answer came clear and prompt. I thanked her, replaced the receiver, and turned to Miss Marple. That's very definite. Colonel Prothero had made arrangements for a man to come down from London on Monday, tomorrow, to make a full valuation. Owing to the Colonel's death, the matter has been put off. Then there was a motive, said Miss Marple softly. A motive, yes, but that's all. You forget when the shot was fired, Dr. Stone had just joined the others, or was climbing over the stile in order to do so. Yes, said Miss Marple thoughtfully, so that rules him out. And that's all of 23. So we'll stop there for today. And good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, hopefully tomorrow we'll be at 24. So we read part 2 of 22 today and 23. Y'all have a happy crafty day and hope to see you all, plus a whole bunch more, live at 5 today. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Love ya. Bye.